Okay, well, thank you all for taking the time to meet with me today. And this is our second instance of the Between Two Ferns CEO chat. And really, the intent of these sessions is to give me time to chat with everybody, as well as hopefully highlight some of the pieces of the ActiveDEMAND ecosystem that you may not be aware of, and get some visibility into some of the things you can do with the system. So it's a case that today, again, my goal is to try to give you some context to the tech stack that we have, and again, introduce you to some of the pieces you may not be using or seen. I'll share a couple of slides and give you a quick demo so you can sort of see what the pieces look like. And then we'll follow up with any of the questions you may have. And today's presentation is really going to highlight our integration with e-commerce platforms. So we've spent a bunch of money and built out native integrations. Typically when we do native integration, we really like to go deep and give lots of, it isn't just a checkbox. If we're gonna write some code, we want, just like the rest of the platform, we want to give it our best go so that you're getting value out of the system. So as you know, with ActiveDEMAND, we have a fairly rich tool set, and it's a case that you're all, if you're watching this broadcast, you're people that have been using ActiveDEMAND, and you're familiar with the base, the core pieces of it, the emails, the dynamic content, the landing pages, appointment scheduling, call tracking, etc. Now, usually when we're, excuse me, deploying ActiveDEMAND, we're typically engaging with some type of a CMS, right? And I would say the big dog is WordPress. So a lot of the installs of ActiveDEMAND are integrating with a WordPress site. And WordPress as a CMS, we have a very deep integration with WordPress, as you know. Both our dynamic content, our pop-ups and overlays, scripting, call tracking, all of that stuff, as well as the forms, etc., are exposed in through the WordPress plugin. And what I'm going to talk about today is actually our similar integrations that we've done with some of the other platforms, and specifically the platforms I'm going to talk about are the e-commerce platforms. So the e-commerce platforms that and really this is for people who are shopping online. It's typically B2C, but we do have some B2B clients that have e-commerce stores that are selling to other companies. And some of the more common e-commerce platforms, we've actually went and did a native integration similar to what we've done with WordPress. Specifically, the ones that we've done integrations with, PrestaShop. PrestaShop has a fairly strong following in the EU. Another one that is a Canadian platform, Shopify. It seems to, I think that's one of the bigger dogs in the e-commerce world. Magento is another one, and they were bought by, boy, my brain is clutch is slipping. Anyways, Adobe bought Magento, and that's another e-commerce platform. And WooCommerce, which is actually sort of it's built on top of WordPress. So naturally, we have the WordPress integration. So we will have some base functionality for WooCommerce. But of course, like I said, as we've went deeper and tried to have a similar experience, no matter what your or your client's e-commerce platform of choice is. So we originally had some e-commerce, some WooCommerce capabilities, but when we went and built out the other e-commerce platforms like Shopify, Magento, and PrestaShop, we went back and revisited the WooCommerce capabilities in our WordPress plugin. So really, there's two separate types of models with the e-commerce platforms. One is where we are creating a plugin to the e-commerce environment, similar to WordPress. So with these environments, it's like it's similar to a CMS. It's a hosted environment. Sometimes the people that are using WooCommerce, PrestaShop, or Magento, they have fired up a server, or it's with their hosting company, or they have paid for a managed service. But they're, I would say, I don't know if open source is the word, but they are open platforms in that you can load modules into the environment itself. So, for example, with WordPress, the ActiveDEMAND plugin, you load the plugin. The plugin is hosted right on the server that your website is being served from. And so hence, definitely with the WooCommerce integration, it is actually on WordPress. So you are using the ActiveDEMAND WordPress plugin and we actually detect that WooCommerce is on the WordPress site. So there's nothing that you have to do. You don't have to install anything else. You have the WordPress plugin. If WooCommerce is on that site, then ActiveDEMAND is going to detect that WooCommerce is there and then expose some of the new functionality that is been built specifically for the WooCommerce integration. And for PrestaShop, we have built a separate extension or module that as well you load into the PrestaShop environment. And again, whether you're hosting it yourself or have a managed service, ActiveDEMAND doesn't care. At the end of the day, you're taking the ActiveDEMAND plugin and loading it into the PrestaShop server. So the actions, etc., are happening from within PrestaShop. And you're configuring the plugin similar to WordPress. You're configuring the plugin directly from within the PrestaShop environment. And same goes with Magento. Magento, again, it's a self-managed or self-hosted platform that you install on top of a web server. And again, there's a module that we've built that resides directly inside the Magento store. And you're configuring, engaging with the ActiveDEMAND platform from within Magento. Now, the other one is a standalone app. Like Shopify is a fully managed service. So when people go use Shopify, they are opening an account with Shopify, and the magic happens in Shopify's world. And there is no, you're not hosting Shopify. Shopify is a platform that people use, and it's hosted by Shopify. So definitely one of the things about Shopify is that the Shopify ecosystem, anything that plugs into Shopify, it isn't actually residing inside Shopify's ecosystem directly. So what we had to do to build the Shopify integration is we had to build our own Shopify service that's actually managed and hosted within the ActiveDEMAND ecosystem. And then a connection is made to Shopify, and you are configuring, managing, engaging with the ActiveDEMAND service from within the Shopify store, but it is not a plugin that is sideloaded into the Shopify service. So it is a external app that we manage ourselves. So how does ActiveDEMAND help? Well, clearly, ActiveDEMAND, as you all know on the phone, is it's a tool set for demand gen, right? And we're really using ActiveDEMAND to apply pressure to a population of people to try to get them to move towards from being non-customers to being customers, and then repeat customers. And really, one of the big benefits of ActiveDEMAND is, of course, attribution. Giving you visibility into the buyer journeys, giving you visibility into what of the marketing activities is working, what of the marketing activities is not working, etc. So this is exactly, it's true for B2B, B2C as well. There is a demand gen, a role for demand gen in e-commerce as well, because again, if you or your customer are selling stuff online, at the end of the day, you want people to buy, so you're going to use digital marketing and marketing automation. It's all that magic. It's still true for e-commerce. And some of the unique capabilities of ActiveDEMAND is the contextual content side of things. So with WordPress, many of you have been using our dynamic content to suppress content that isn't relevant for the buyer in the specific buyer journey or their specific buyer interests. The contextual tooltips, overlays, pop-ups, all of that stuff is, you've been using this in WordPress today. Well, with our native integrations that we've done with the e-commerce platforms, this is exposed as well. So it's a case that the same type of things you've been doing with WordPress are now possible with the e-commerce platforms. And so it's a case that from e-commerce perspective, you can use the contextual content instead if somebody comes to the store and they're interested in, for example, if it's a pet food store and they're buying hamster food, well, you know, the hero banner might show that they're, boy, we treat hamster owners like your hamsters are in good hands here in our pet shop store, and show more and more of the, you know, the hamster testimony. Oh, I love my hamster's gotten way healthier on some of the things that I bought here at Pets R Us or whatever it's called. So the point is that there's the same contextual content is now being deployed on the e-commerce platform. Or another thing as well is that if somebody visits a cart, you can keep pushing that content from that cart back to the person so that, yes, you've got what you wanted, you're just gotta go click submit, etc. And of course, the other things like web forms, that's another big piece. It's still a website, like these e-commerce platforms, there's still a website, so there's a lot of engagement that still happens through web forms. And automation triggers. So some of the platforms, they do have some base types of triggers and automation. And I know with Shopify, you have to pay for Shopify Plus, I think, to get at their automations. Well, we actually bring in this concept of triggered automations into all of the e-commerce platforms. So with the base platform of Shopify, using our tool set, for example, it exposes many of the automations that are only available to those stores that are paying for the Shopify Plus platform, with them not actually having to pay for it. So there's a lot of advantages. So triggers like, you know, on customer change, on order status change, or even cart abandonment has also been integrated into our platform. So how does it work is typically, well, the first step is always, of course, connecting the app or installing the plugin. So there's different ways of getting the plugins in the app, and I'll talk about that. And then once the app is installed, then really how we're communicating from the e-commerce stores for these triggers. Of course, we're getting the attribution and we're triggering dynamic content and pop-ups in the web. All of that stuff is exactly the same as it is with any other CMS. Because in essence, these e-commerce platforms are just CMSs that are focused on selling stuff online. But for our automations, the trigger is a hidden form, right? So I know many of you have done this before with other integrations with ActiveDEMAND, is you post to a form that nobody sees from a platform, and then that hidden form, it's really just an endpoint for receiving a transaction from the e-commerce platform, or any other platform for that matter. But with e-commerce, we are using the form as an endpoint to receive a transaction, a state change, etc. So these are the callbacks you're posting to these forms in ActiveDEMAND, and then the form submissions end up triggering dynamic content campaigns, etc., which we're all familiar with. So it's similar to this, is that if we think about the CMSs or the e-commerce platforms on the left, we'll set up some configurations inside the e-commerce platforms as triggers, and the trigger will post to, and the transaction endpoint in ActiveDEMAND is a web form. So again, the web form, nobody sees it. It's just an object that you create in ActiveDEMAND that will receive data from a callback from the external system. So when these triggers happen, then that will drive automation, etc., inside ActiveDEMAND. And I'll show you this in just a couple of minutes from the back end. So where do we get these plugins? With WooCommerce, it's just a WordPress plugin. So basically, in the WooCommerce store, it is a WordPress site. Go to the WordPress marketplace, find the plugin, upload the plugin. You're good to go. And we just, like I said, we detect that WooCommerce is there, and we expose a bunch of WooCommerce specific functionality in the plugin configuration. So you don't see this if you don't have a WooCommerce infrastructure installed on the WooCommerce, but I mean on the WordPress site. But as soon as you install it, ActiveDEMAND detects it. You can go look at the plugin. There's a bunch of stuff exposed. Now with Magento, Magento has a marketplace. So it's a case that from your Magento site, similar to WordPress, you go find their extensions or modules or whatever they call them, and in the marketplace is the ActiveDEMAND plugin. It's free, and you can just install it directly from the WooCommerce store. Shopify. So Shopify, we're not in the Shopify marketplace, but it is a standalone app. And if you go to our support portal and just look for Shopify integration, it'll give you a very clear path on how to connect the Shopify server, our Shopify server, with the Shopify store. And then once that's done, you're now working from within Shopify to configure the plugin. But with PrestaShop, it's a case that if you're installing the PrestaShop plugin from the marketplace, you're going to have to pay PrestaShop. It's like €35 or something like that for the plugin, so it's not free. But you can go to our support portal and download the plugin for free. So we're not charging you for the plugin. If you just go to our support portal, there's a link right inside the support portal. It shows you how to install from our support portal, support.activedemand.com, and you can upload the plugin from our support portal, and you don't have to pay for it. But if you want the convenience of getting it from the marketplace and you have an extra €35, feel free to contribute to the folks at PrestaShop. So I'm just going to go through a quick demo now of just to show you what the back end looks like on some of these things, so you can sort of get an idea of what it looks like. So I'm going to start off with the WooCommerce. So this is just a very simple WooCommerce site. So it's just a WordPress site, and if you've used ActiveDEMAND, of course, the WordPress plugin, now it detects that. So of course, all the other features like the call tracking, the dynamic content, the pop-ups, the overlays, all of that stuff is just standard from our WordPress plugin. But now there's a new tab that shows up, which is our WooCommerce tab. And there's two sub-tabs in here. One is cart recovery, one is automation. So the automation section, we're basically finding triggers. So for example, customer created, customer updated, and then there's, with WooCommerce, there's a fixed set of order status changes. And what you'll see here is order pending, order processed, processing completed, canceled, refunded. So this is a callback that calls to our server when the WooCommerce status change happens. So if an order is moved to pending, this callback is fired and it calls to this configured form. So basically, these drop downs will expose ActiveDEMAND web forms that you've built in ActiveDEMAND. And so you choose the form and then you do field mapping. And basically what we're doing is we're mapping fields from WooCommerce into ActiveDEMAND form fields. So it gives you some flexibility in that you can build your form. You can take a look here and see what's available from WooCommerce. and then you can create subsequent form fields in ActiveDEMAND, and we will post, WooCommerce will post to this form in ActiveDEMAND and pass the information that you've configured here into ActiveDEMAND. And one of the fields, the product IDs and product names, these are actually lists. So if you use a multi-option pick list on ActiveDEMAND, it will populate that data in ActiveDEMAND, and then you can use the autoresponder to pick that apart and set metadata on the prospect and trigger automations in ActiveDEMAND based on that. So it's the same thing for all of these. Is basically like when they create a customer, you can go post a new customer form to a new customer form in ActiveDEMAND, or customer updated. But in ActiveDEMAND, it will trigger a form fill, and you can decide on the form whether it's going to trigger campaigns or not, or if it's just an endpoint to capture a transaction. Now, something that is important for all e-commerce platforms is the concept of cart abandonment. So the cart abandonment for all of these platforms with our integration, really you can't, the idea is somebody adds to the cart, you want to go back and get this person to, fulfill the order. Now, for us to communicate with that individual, we have to know the individual. So all of these cases, it is somebody that the store knows, and we're going to go communicate with that individual during that upload. I should say to try to get them back. So if Marge Smith came to the website, added her hamster food to the cart, and they already know Marge because she's logged in, she's bought before, and then she gets distracted, maybe the hamster got out of the cage, and then she's chasing her hamster for a couple of days. Well, we can say, hey, Marge, don't forget you got to feed the hamster. So we can do communications with SMS or emails or any of these things that we do in ActiveDEMAND to get Marge back to fulfill the order. That's really the concept. So we define a stale cart period, and then we define a callback to ActiveDEMAND to, again, go call to the form in ActiveDEMAND, and ActiveDEMAND will start the process of trying to get Marge to consider her poor hamster's food. Now, Shopify, it's a little bit different, but still it's a case we have our online store, and it's a case that we configure it through the app section. So you see here, it's similar to WordPress in that you're actually configuring the plugin from within Shopify, the Shopify environment. So it's a case we have the content tab, which is similar to the content tab in the WordPress plugin, where we're exposing shortcodes or divs for forms, and we're exposing divs for dynamic content. So basically what you do is you'll copy this div, go into the specific page or part of the e-commerce platform here, and then you will inject the div similar to the shortcodes that we use in WordPress to leverage the dynamic content. So you can change hero banners, sidebar ads, or what have you on the analogous structures in Shopify. But basically, instead of a short code, you're using this div and you're inserting this into the HTML in the Shopify page editor for the store. Now, we have a couple of other tabs similar that are analogous to the tabs that we exposed in WooCommerce, where we have these elements where these are the callbacks. Basically, when the Shopify store detects any of these happening, it's going to post to these web forms that you've configured in ActiveDEMAND. And again, it's the same story where we're taking the form fields, we're mapping those form fields to elements that are in Shopify. And the same story for cart recovery. Again, there's a form that we've created in ActiveDEMAND. We're doing field mapping, and we're defining some type of a stale time. So how long does it sit before we start getting this person back to the e-commerce store? And I'll show you, I have one more here. I don't have Magento here, but I do have a PrestaShop, and you can access this PrestaShop demo right from the PrestaShop marketplace. It shows you how to get in here, but again, we have the module manager. We're going to come in here, look at the ActiveDEMAND. You're going to configure the ActiveDEMAND module from within the PrestaShop environment. And it's very similar to the WordPress environment, is that we have the dynamic content. But with this, though, it's kind of cool, is that you can actually hook it directly into objects within the PrestaShop environment. So instead of just copying a div, you can actually inject the div into specific parts of the PrestaShop platform. You can as well use the div here, so you can copy the div and go inject it yourself, or you can inject it here. It's one or the other, so you can hook right into the PrestaShop environment, which is pretty nifty. And it's the same thing here for web forms. You're just you can hook the web form into segments of the site, so that form will render in that part of the site from the hook, or you can use the div similar to how we were doing with Shopify. And of course, we have the automation tab, which similar is that now there's a lot more different order status changes that we can trigger off of in PrestaShop. And again, we are doing similar things with PrestaShop as we're mapping forms. It's the same rinse and repeat. And a cart abandonment, exactly the same story here as well, is that it's a case that we're picking a form in ActiveDEMAND, and it's a case that we are sending the stale carts based on the form fills back to and then you do the field mapping down here. So that's pretty much it. And it's a case that we do, like I was mentioning before, is that when we do a integration, we like to try to maintain consistency across the different interfaces, similar to how we're doing CRM integrations with the e-commerce platforms. We've been trying to maintain a consistent set of tools, features, this type of stuff, regardless of the e-commerce platform that you choose. So. Yeah, so that's pretty much it. As you see, hopefully we have communicated that we have a fairly good story with these e-commerce platforms.